Just a minute. Meanwhile, speaking of the President of the United States, who's being criticized around the clock, not just by Republicans, but by Democrats, for failing to put his face, on the Gulf Coast crisis, for going to a fundraiser tonight instead of going to the Gulf of Mexico and to Louisiana and Mississippi and Alabama and Florida. We have just learned the President of the United States will be heading to the Gulf Friday to try and assess efforts firsthand to stop the oil leak. It'll be his second visit to the area since the oil rig explosion. Most are saying it hasn't been enough. So we're now, what, 24 hours, right? And in 24 hours, I and Chad and Brooke, we all hope to be reporting to you that we have a solution that has worked for the Gulf oil spill. But here's the real story, folks. Whether it works or not, what we already seem to have on our hands is an institutional failure. I mean, why was this industry allowed to drill so deep? Where was the regulation? Where were the safeguards? Where were the controls? Why were they calling their own rocket science questions that we're asking here? In fact, a Coast Guard investigation has revealed that your government wasn't required to inspect the blowout preventer. So who was left to inspect them? The oil companies. Yep. You can't make this stuff up, folks. But wait, there's even more. Remember the battery that was supposed to be replaced to make sure that the fail-safe system worked? It wasn't replaced. Oh, and then there's the testing and the inspections, the ones the oil companies are supposed to do for themselves, right? How well did they generally do these tests and these inspections on these apparatus? Well, let me take you back to an interview that I did right here on Rick's List with a man who has testified in Alaska about oil companies like BP, who he says cut corners for time and for profit. Listen to what Mike Mason has to say.
They're supposed to do an integrity test on the blowout preventers once a week, and they would have a state inspector witness the test at times, but there weren't enough inspectors, so probably about half the time they would waive the witness, and the oil company was left to do it for themselves. And they were supposed to pressure up to 5,000 psi on all the different valves, rams, and other components of the BOPs. And what they would do is they were supposed to pressure up on them for 5 minutes. And what they would do with the paper chart that they use, it would be kind of like a seismograph chart type thing where, the ink pen would go on the paper.
Right.
And yes, what they would do is pressure up for 10, 20, 30 seconds and see that it was holding the 5,000, and they would take their finger and move the chart 5 minutes, and then they would bleed the pressure off and go on to the next valve by saving time doing that.
All right. You know our team, right? Because more and more of you are watching us every day. I got my trusted pal Cato over here, Chad, who's going to be bringing us up to date on what the actual procedure, the top kill procedure is, when it starts, what's going to happen with it. Brooke Baldwin standing by as well, and Brooke's got brand new pictures that she's gotten hold of that she's going to be sharing with you, so we're going to be working them into this conversation in just a moment. We want you to stand by. We've got important information for you, but let's get back to this institutional failure conversation that we were just raising. I want to bring in now Daniel Stone. He's a correspondent for Newsweek magazine, where he covers politics and the environment. He's done a series of reports on what's going on with the Gulf oil situation. Daniel, thanks for being with us, man.
Thanks, Rick. Good to see you.
I use the word institutional failure. Am I wrong?
No, it is actually time in this that we start addressing the institutional question. And we ask ourselves, this is an accident, this is an incident, but is it isolated? And it turns out it's not. If you look back over the past several years, the past decades at the environment of regulation around here, it turns out that this wasn't just one snafu. This wasn't just one accident. There was a clear series of events that led us to where we are now.
Well, let's talk about some of those. Look, we've been reporting, you may have heard me allude to them just a little while ago, some of the bad testing that was done, the lack of fail-safe systems. What competent scientist would allow these things to happen? So I'm asking, I mean, I know there's a profit margin and businesses are going to want to make as much money as they can. I would if I had a business. But where were the scientists, the smart guys that are supposed to step in and say, no, you can't do that because you can cause a problem and we're not going to let you? Where were those guys?
The short answer is that they weren't there. One of the things that the oil industry and certainly BP have gotten really good at over the past decade is to downplay the risk, is to say, don't worry about the inspections. We're going to take care of our own inspections. We've got the safeguards in place. We've got the people to make sure that this isn't going to happen. Most of the time it doesn't happen, but as we've seen from some of the reports that have come out of this particular incident, that there were definitely certain lapses over the past month leading up to this incident.
You know what I want to ask you about? You've done a lot of reporting on this, and Chad and I have had a lot of conversations about this. At the point where they started to drill at very deep depths, so deep, in fact, that you can't get people down there, only those special submersibles that we have been watching. Didn't somebody, shouldn't maybe somebody have raised a flag at that point and said, wait a minute, we want to go down a mile below the ocean where we may not be able to control the environment if something bad happens?
That's what this blowout preventer is really for, to make sure, and that's their safeguard. That's what they put in place. The reason there really was no worst case scenario planned for this, they didn't know what could happen, is because nothing like this has ever happened before. Remember, we were talking about Exxon Valdez 2 months ago as the worst oil spill ever. That was 250,000 barrels. We went through that in the first few days after this incident, so you can't really plan for an incident of a magnitude that you've never seen before, and no one really thought it could get this big.
Well, people are going to point to, let me ask you this question. You know, people in our audience aren't dumb, okay? They're watching you and I have this conversation, and they follow the Bush and Cheney years, and they know that Bush and Cheney are oil guys. And they're all going to probably, the liberals especially, are going to want to say, well, you know, we probably can blame it on Bush and Cheney because they were oil guys. I guarantee you that they were exacerbating the situation. Is that fair? Was it only Cheney and Bush, or has this been something that's been coming along for quite a while previous to them and including some of the Democrats who were in the White House?
Well, the Bush administration certainly lifted one of the moratoriums on offshore drilling, so there is that. But if you look at the Obama administration, the Bush administration, even back to Clinton, I think it's very telling that in the days after this particular incident, Secretary Salazar said, wait a minute, we need to address how the Mineral Management Service actually operates. And he separated those two, and he said the agency that collects revenue for drilling in these leases shouldn't be the same agency that regulates and that oversees, safety protocol here. The fact that he said that signals that over the past decade, things probably weren't in place, in the most effective way.
Well, I was just going to let our audience know that Mineral Management Services is part of the Interior Department. They're the ones who are supposed to oversee a lot of these leases and how they actually are handled in places like the Gulf, for example. I'm going to hold you right there. Can you stick around? I want to bring you back because I think suddenly, today's story, yesterday we were very micro. Today I think it's more of a macro story. What's going on? Even if they solve this thing tomorrow, I think we're still left with a lot of very important questions that this country is going to have to be dealing with and asking itself, not just in the short run, but probably over the next decade or so. And I got Brooke standing by, and Brooke, you've got some brand new pictures. Give me a tease on that, will you?
So I have pictures from the Gulf, different examples of animals that potentially are, ramifications of some of the damage. And I also got video from, remember our conversation yesterday with Jean-Michel Cousteau? They sent me the video, that underwater video. So I'll have that on the other side of the break.
Well, and apparently, you know what, Chad, this new this operation they're going to do tomorrow at first thing in the morning, what's it called? Quick kill?
Top kill.
Top kill. They've got so many names for these things. I start to forget them.
Jump shot, top kill.
Jump shot, top kill.
I know.
Well, we've just been told that BP will likely not let us see this as it happens. In other words, the video feed will likely be cut. We're drilling down on that. I want to get your opinion on that as well. And we're going to have these conversations when I come right back. As you can tell, we at Rick's List are devoted to this story. We're going to put everything we got on it.